Today, we'll debate would Lee be better as a Jedi Knight than as a senator? With Zara, a Force-Futurist, and Jonas, a Galactic Traditionalist. They're two artificial intelligence personas. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Zara. Yes, like Zar, which is what my friends say I act like when I talk about the Republic's future. But trust me, I don't want a crown, just a lightsaber. I grew up binge-watching ancient Jedi holovids and arguing with my parents about why politics is way cooler when you can actually sense if someone's lying. Seriously, who needs filibusters? When you have forced persuasion, I see a galaxy where Jedi aren't just cloistered in their fancy temples, twiddling their thumbs with meditation beads, but actually rolling up their sleeves and fixing things. Why not have leaders who can levitate legislation as well as pass it? I mean, come on. If you can block blaster bolts with your mind, surely you can handle a trade negotiation. In my book, that makes Leia the ultimate leader. Slinging wisdom, justice, and a mean side braid. Old rules? Meh, so last millennium. Isn't it time we force things forward?
Well, I'm Jonas, professional skeptic, proud curmudgeon, and only slightly allergic to change. I was born in the same month the Galactic Senate moved my favorite lunch cafeteria 3 floors up, and I've been complaining ever since. If you want to find me, just listen for the sound of someone loudly reading old parliamentary bylaws in the library. Look, I respect the Jedi a little too much, frankly. They've got fancy robes, swing glow sticks, and can tell if you took that last piece of bantha jerky, which is honestly terrifying. But leave saving the galaxy to them, and let politicians do the real hard work. Endless debates, compromise, and paperwork. Leia Organa in the Senate. That's democracy at work. Leia with a lightsaber in the Chancellor's chair. That's how you get floating furniture and heartburn. Give me a senator who gets things done the boring, old-fashioned way. No mind tricks required.
Thank you, guys. Zara and Jonas will now present their 3 rounds of arguments.
Jonas, I get it. You like your politics slow-cooked, steeped in tradition, and maybe a little bland. But let's be honest, when crises erupt, tradition alone can't fix everything. Take Leia. Her sense, intuition, and, yes, her Jedi powers could be exactly what the Republic needs to cut through the usual gridlock. Imagine if, during Earth's darkest hours, someone like Abraham Lincoln also had the wisdom of Yoda. He might have settled the Civil War in record time and written the Emancipation Proclamation with a wave of his hand. Think about it. When real transformation was needed, like when Mandela moved from prisoner to president, or when Golda Meir navigated Israel through chaos. It took leaders who blended old values with extraordinary ability. Leia, as a Jedi Knight in government, is that next evolution. Why just argue about tax reform for months when you could meditate, see the bigger picture, and then persuade both sides? No mind tricks, just insight. Let's not fear force-forward politics. Let's embrace leaders who combine heart, wisdom, and if necessary, a little telekinesis to get things moving.
Zara, I respect your enthusiasm for all things shiny and force-powered, but let's not toss out the playbook just because it's missing lightsabers. Every time we put too much faith in heroes with extraordinary powers, we stumble hard. Just look at Earth history. Remember Julius Caesar? People thought the Roman Republic needed a strong man who could see the bigger picture. Next thing you know, democracy's out and everyone's saluting from the breadline. Let's not pretend leaders with superhuman insight always pick the wisest path. Napoleon thought he was destined to reshape Europe, and just ended up with a biography full of battles and bad decisions. The best progress came from leaders who listened, compromised, and were held in check. Like Cincinnatus or boring old technocrats who knew how to count votes, not just levitate rocks. I'm not saying the Jedi aren't seasoned, but mixing spiritual power with political muscle? That's how you make a recipe for dictatorship, not democracy. Let's leave telekinesis and mind tricks in the training room and keep our decision makers where they belong, behind the Senate desk, wading through the thrilling world of budget amendments.
Oh, Jonas, I see you gone full beware the Caesar on me. Next thing you'll warn us about Jedi building aqueducts or renaming the months after themselves. Relax. I'm not suggesting we hand over the Senate keys to a Force-powered emperor, just giving Leia the chance to be the ultimate team player, not the benevolent dictator from your historical nightmares. Let's also remember, some of your safe technocrats spent decades arguing about how to rearrange chairs on sinking ships. No offense, but if committees could save the galaxy, we wouldn't need evacuation drills every other Tuesday. At least Jedi leaders can sense an impending crisis before it arrives, instead of scheduling a 12-hour debate on what to call it. And don't worry, Jonas. Combining wisdom with a pinch of telekinesis doesn't mean we're starting mandatory Force push Mondays. It just means electing leaders who aren't outflanked by every new crisis or Sith plot. I'll take an empathetic, visionary Jedi senator over another gray-suited starch counselor who thinks innovation is switching to recycled datapads. Call me idealistic. I'd rather live in a republic that actually works, not one stuck in bureaucratic carbonite.
Zara, I admire your optimism and bravery for trusting anyone who can levitate furniture to also negotiate trade disputes. But let's put the fun in fundamental constitutional stability for a second. Sure, Jedi sense trouble before it happens. But so do astromech droids, and no one's suggesting we make R2-D2 the finance minister. Although, frankly, he'd probably do better than some of these so-called visionaries. If Jedi foresight is so remarkable, remind me, how'd that work out with Palpatine hanging around in plain sight? The last time we handed the keys to peace-loving space wizards, half the galaxy wound up with a Darth problem. At least my gray-suited starch counselors won't accidentally choke anyone if the budget talks go long. Look, I'm all for forward thinking, as long as it doesn't mean turning the Senate chamber into the Jedi Council's waiting room. Give me a leader who sweats the small stuff, files the paperwork, and can't crush policy opposition with a wink. The only thing I want flying in the Senate is paperwork, preferably signed in triplicate.
Jonas, I see we're right back to the Jedi will take over the Galaxy Greatest Hits album. Don't worry. I'm not about to nominate the Force for Chancellor or slip a lightsaber into every welcome packet. But come on, you can't blame the Jedi for one bad egg. Looking at you, Palpatine. Any more than you'd cancel all technocrats, because one auditor misplaced a decimal and funded an intergalactic hamster farm. You want to talk about paperwork? How about the paperwork generated every time a by-the-book senator misses a brewing disaster until it's trending on the holonet? At least a Jedi senator would sense the coming storm. Maybe even before. We're all knee-deep in sand and Imperial rematches. And between us, the only thing your gray suit committee ever levitates is the budget, out of the solvency zone. So here's the deal. Wisdom, empathy, a dash of Force insight. These don't replace democracy, they turbocharge it. Leaders like Leia bridge divides, blend wisdom with action, and yes, keep the Empire at bay. Give me a republic that adapts, not one that's gathering dust next to Jonas' filing cabinets.
Zara, I appreciate your passion, truly. But let's not confuse turbocharging democracy with driving it off a cliff at hyperspeed. I know you think the bureaucracy is slower than Jabba the Hutt after a buffet, but careful process is what keeps the galaxy from turning every good idea into the next galactic crisis. And let's face it, sometimes a little dust on a filing cabinet is better than scorch marks from a stray Force lightning mishap. You say every Jedi is Palpatine, I'll give you that. But senators aren't all scheming technocrats either. Most of them are just over-caffeinated policy wonks who occasionally take lunch breaks, not power naps on the dark side. If every brewing crisis was solved with the Force, we'd miss the messy but necessary work of debate, compromise and, dare I say, governing. So here's my bottom line. Blending Jedi powers with politics is a recipe for too much special sauce and not enough meat and potatoes. I'd rather move at a steady pace with open ledgers and oversight than hurl the Republic headlong into the unknown with only a side braid, and trust me, I've got a hunch.
Thank you for your speeches. Someone from the audience will now make a question to Zara and Jonas. Hi everyone, I am Priya Relin, a history teacher from Corellia who's been following galactic politics since Mon Mothma was in her first term. So you could say I am a veteran observer and occasional grumbler at the holonet. My question is for Zara. You've talked a lot about the benefits of having a Jedi's intuition and abilities in leadership, but what about accountability? Senators have checks and balances, and their actions can be scrutinized in the open. And, let's be real, sometimes in the tabloids. How would you ensure that a Jedi senator like Leia, with access to unique powers and insights that others can't verify, remains fully accountable to the public and doesn't operate above the law or outside civic norms?
Great question, Priya. Thanks for keeping us honest. You're absolutely right. Unique powers need unique responsibility. If we want our Jedi senators to be more than just wise space wizards with cool tricks, transparency and accountability have to be front and center. No secret hand-waving or backroom mind tricks allowed. First, I'd insist that Jedi in government be subject to all the regular Senate oversight, audits, ethics reviews, even that dreaded public that keeps everyone on their toes. Their use of the Force should be tracked just like any official resource. You wouldn't let a senator secretly use unlimited credits, so why let anyone make decisions by gut feeling with no questions asked? Also, any policy or action based on the Force would need a clear public rationale. None of this "a feeling told me so" stuff. Plus, Jedi senators would pledge not to use their powers for personal or political gain and face real consequences if they cross the line. Think of it like a code of conduct, only with even more reason to stick to the letter and the spirit. In short, being a Jedi isn't a free pass. In fact, if someone like Leia takes on double duty, she should be doubly accountable to the Senate, the citizens, and a galaxy that expects its heroes to be humble.
Thanks, Zara, for your thoughtful answer. Jonas, here's a question for you. You've made a strong case for tradition and keeping the Jedi separate from politics, but we know the Republic has faced situations where traditional methods and bureaucracy fail to react quickly enough to threats or humanitarian crises. In those moments, rigid process can slow things down or even cost lives. So, what reforms, if any, would you support to help make the Senate more agile and responsive to emergencies, without relying on Jedi or special powers to save the day?
Thank you, Priya. That's a sharp question and one that touches on my biggest gripe with government. When bureaucracy moves at the speed of a bantha stampede, in the wrong direction. I'll be the first to admit that red tape can wrap itself tighter than a hut at lunchtime. But rather than shortcutting the process with Jedi shortcuts, I'd support practical reforms to sharpen our Senate. For example, establish emergency response committees empowered to make fast decisions during genuine crises, but with clear rules, limited scope, and built-in oversight, so no one's running wild. Bring in independent, nonpartisan experts for rapid consultation, kind of like having a medical droid handy instead of waiting for the entire hospital board to agree on a prescription. I'd also push for better use of technology. Real-time data sharing, crisis simulations, and direct citizen feedback loops. Heck, let's let the bureaucrats keep their paperwork, but at least give them speeders instead of banthas to deliver it. The point is, we can streamline responsibly, without swinging the pendulum toward unchecked powers. To me, it's about building a smarter, faster, yet still accountable system. A republic ready for emergencies, but never tempted down the road to just trust the special folks. That's how we preserve both stability and our democratic bones.
The debaters now have a minute to talk about something they regret not bringing up to the discussion.
Oh, Priya, if only I'd thought to mention that having Jedi in the Senate would mean never losing your keys again. Who needs a coat hook when you got the Force? Total missed opportunity there. The Galactic Lost and Found would go out of business overnight. And Jonas, I have to say, your proposal about putting the paperwork on speeders gave me a good laugh. Because nothing says efficient government like a convoy of file folders doing a lap around the Senate building. Personally, I'll take a Jedi calmly diffusing a crisis over a stampede of droids carrying memos any day. But hey, at least your way is more entertaining to watch.
You know, Priya, suddenly I regret not mentioning the one thing senators have over Jedi, an immunity to mind tricks from their own teenagers at home. If I could use the Force to convince my kids to clean their rooms, I'd have retired to Naboo years ago. As for Zara, I have to chuckle at your Jedi insight will turbocharge democracy pitch. Frankly, if turbocharging worked so well, pod racers wouldn't explode after the first lap. Sometimes, a little less vision and a little more common sense saves a lot of fiery wreckage. But hey, maybe if Leia ever gets bored of politics, she can open up the galaxy's best lost and found service. Force retrieval included.
Thank you, folks. Let's go over to our judges.
Zara's scores: 1. Clarity and persuasiveness. 8.5 out of 10. Zara presented her arguments with energy and clear structure. She effectively articulated how Jedi insight could benefit governance and addressed the accountability concern concisely when prompted. Occasionally, ambitious metaphors or humor slightly muddled her message, but her overall reasoning remained accessible and audience-friendly. 2. Responsiveness and rebuttal. 9 out of 10 Zara directly engaged with Jonas' points, especially when she addressed historical fears and Jonas' insistence on tradition. Her rebuttals were sharp, polite, and laced with wit, keeping the tone lively without descending into disrespect. She was quick to diffuse Jonas' concerns without avoiding tough questions. 3. Use of evidence and examples. 7.5 out of 10 While Zara referenced historic figures like Lincoln and Mandela convincingly, some arguments leaned on imagination, e.g., levitate legislation, rather than hard practical examples. Her points on accountability, when pressed, became specific and grounded, but initial arguments sometimes lacked substantive, real-world procedural analogs. Jonas scores. 1. Clarity and persuasiveness. 8 out of 10 Jonas kept his style consistent, with humor that reinforced his arguments about democracy and stability. His delivery of warnings from history, Caesar, Napoleon, drove home his logic, though he occasionally relied on caricature over nuance, which cost a touch of credibility. 2. Responsiveness and rebuttal. 8.5 out of 10 Jonas responded to Zara's arguments point by point, deftly turning her optimism into critiques of unchecked power. He excelled in defensive rebuttal, highlighting slippery slope risks and citing the practical value of open process. His ability to joke while rebutting showed poise and control. 3. Use of evidence and examples. 9 out of 10 Jonas' argument was grounded in real historical cases, using the fates of the Roman Republic and Napoleon's France to illuminate risks. He thoughtfully addressed the potential for reform in response to direct questioning, providing practical, concrete suggestions informed by precedent, which elevated the overall substance of his case.
What are your opinions about the debate? What would you like to see ICE debate next? Keep questioning.